Hello algebra students, this lesson is solving percent problems. Before we can solve a percent problem, a couple things we have to know. First, what is a percent? Percent is a ratio that compares a number to 100. And the symbol for percent is this little percent sign. Okay? Now, percents are used everywhere. It's probably one of the most widely used math concepts that you guys will use beyond high school. Now, first off, when you calculate a percent, you have to convert them to a decimal. So how do we turn a decimal into a percent? Basically, either divide the percent by 100, or you can move the decimal 2 places to the left. Okay? Now, sometimes when you get your quizzes back, you'll get, say, 3 out of 4 correct, and you want to know what your percent is. Well, when you divide 3 by 4, you get 0.75. Well, how do you convert a decimal to a percent? Well, you basically convert it to a percent by multiplying the decimal by 100, or move the decimal 2 places to the right. So before we start calculating with percents, now let's kind of talk about converting percents to decimals here. If I have 6%, I can either divide that by 100, or I can move the decimal 2 places to the right. I think it's probably best to just divide it by 100 all the time to make sure you get it correct. So 6% to a decimal, when you divide it by 100, you would get 0.06. If I take 18% and I divide it by 100, 18% as a decimal is 0.18. Now 140%, right? If I divide that by 100, that would be 1.40. So 140% as a decimal would be 1.40. Now if you notice here, this is 1/2 of a percent, or 0.5%. When I divide that by 100, I get 0.005. Okay? Now remember, you could also move the decimal 2 places to the left and fill in any missing places with a 0. Right? So 18%. It's 18 point, because the decimal's to the far right, 1, 2, you get 0.18. 140%. If I look at 140, the decimal's here, move it 2 places, I end up with 1.40. And 0.5%, move it 2 places, fill them in with 0.005. Okay? So to convert a percent to a decimal, you take the percent and you divide it by 100. Now, when we convert decimals to percents, we basically multiply by 100. So 0.67 as a percent would be 67%. 1.25 as a percent, when you multiply it by 100, you get 125%. 7% is a decimal. Multiply that by 100 and you get 7%. And then this one, 0.025 is a percent. When you multiply by 100 or move the decimal 2 places to the right, you get 2.5%. So it's very important to be able to convert one way to another. Now, next, how do we complete these problems? Percent problems. A lot of us have heard is over of equals percent over 100. So this is a proportion we use to help us answer these percent problems. So let's look at some of these problems. Okay, what number is 55%? So we have our percent of 70, right? So when we look at it, do we know what our is? No. Our is we don't know, so we say x. Over, what is our of? 70. Equals the percent, which is 55%, over 100. Now if you remember how to solve a proportion problem, we basically cross multiply. 100 times x is 100x equals 3,850 when you cross multiply this way. So when we divide by 100, we end up getting x is 38.5. So 38.5 is 55% of 70. Okay? Now, some of us will also just say, alright, well, what is 55% of 70? Well, to figure out 55% of 70, remember, to calculate with percent, you have to convert it to a decimal. And the word of means multiplication. So 55% is 0.55 is a decimal. Of means multiplication. So 55% of 70 ends up being, if you take 0.55 and multiply it by 70, you get 38.5. Alright, that's the way I prefer to do it, but some of us might struggle with that. Now, what is 160% of 24? Right? If you set up your proportion, you would do x over 24. So you don't know the is, you know the of, right? So is over of equals, the percent is 160 over 100. Now when you cross multiply, you get 100x equals 24 times 160. Does it give you? 24 times 160 gives you 3840. When you divide by 100, you end up getting x is equal to 38.4. Now again, if you use the other method, 160% of 24, 160% is a decimal, is 1.6 times 24 would give you 38.4. If you think about it, right, 100% of something would be the whole value. So 100% of 24 would be 24. So you know 160% of 24 is going to be more than 24. Now, the next one, if we go ahead and set up a proportion, okay, the is, 40 is, so 40 is the is 30%, so we know the percent over 100 of what number? That's the part. The of I don't know. So here's a proportion you would use for this problem. And if you cross multiply, you get 30x equals 4,000. And when you divide by 30, you will get x equals 133.35. Now, the other method, alright, 40 is, I like to set up an equation here. 40 is my equal sign. 30%, alright, is 0.30 as a decimal. And you don't know the of. So remember, you multiply the percent and the of to get the amount. So, what would I do to solve for x here? Divide by 0.30, and x would equal 40 divided by 0.30 would end up giving you 133.35. So, I'm basically going to go through each setup, but speed up the solving process here. So 150 is, so that's the is. 125% of what number? I don't know the of, so that's x. That's one setup. Or your other setup can be 1.25 times x equals 150. Either way, when you cross multiply and solve, or divide and solve, you end up getting 120. Number 13. What percent of 300 is 200? So, the of is 300, the is 200. So, we get 200 is over of 300. Don't know the percent over 100. That is one setup, and when you cross multiply, you get percent times, 300 times, you're looking for the percent, we'll say x equals, what is that, 20,000, and when you divide by 300, you end up getting 66.67%. Okay, now if you did it the other way, okay, what would you do with this? Well, it's almost like a quiz score you get 200 out of 300 possible points. Right? When you divide this, you get 0.667. How do you convert that to a percent? Basically multiply it by 100 to get 66.67%, or 66.7%. Okay, so what percent of 100 is 400? Well, if you look at this, you would do the is 400 over the of 100 equals the percent x over 100. So when you do it, 100x equals 40,000, and when you divide it, you get x is 400%. Okay? Now, number 15. Your bill at a restaurant is $64. If you tip the waitress 20%, how much was the tip? And the way I like to think of it is 20% of 64 is how much? Now, instead of setting up a proportion like we did up here, it's much easier to know. To figure out a percent of a certain amount, you basically just take the percent, change it to a decimal, 0.20, and multiply it by the amount. And when you do 0.20 times 64, you get $12.80 would be an appropriate tip. Okay, and that is an appropriate tip. So, 16. Carl Sandburg has approximately 3,500 students. 2,100 students participate in some sport. What percent of the students are active in a sport? Well, think about it here. It's almost like, again, a test or a quiz score. Alright? How many total students are there? 3,500. And out of the 3,500, how many participate? 2,100. Now, if you take this and divide it, you get 0.6. Okay? But now, that is not the percent. To convert that to a percent, we multiply it by 100, and we come up with 60% of the students in school participate in some sport. Next, Jack's pool can hold 30,000 gallons of water. If the pool is 60% full, how many gallons are in the pool? Well, again, we want to think of this as 60% of 30,000 is equal to what? So, convert the percent to a decimal, 0.60. Multiply it by the amount, 30,000 is equal to, when you do the math, you end up getting, there are 18,000 gallons inside that pool. Alright? So it's being able to set them up and kind of look at it. So be very careful when you're doing these. Make sure you read them correctly and practice them. Go ahead and complete the U-Tries on your own and seek extra help if you need it. Thank you.